Good morning, North America. Welcome to Church Talk, lively conversation for all things church transformation. I'm your co-host, Dr. Bill Tenney Britton, in our studio in Columbia, Missouri, the heartland of the U.S. And I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, author and denominational leader, Dr. Kris Tenney Britton, the area minister of the Northeast area of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ of Mid-America. Try and say that 3 times fast. Good morning, Kris.
Well, good morning, and welcome to Church Talk Live.
Bill and Kris Tenney Britton here today to talk to you about, finally, the third stage of the transformational journey. We've started with the Exodus back in Egypt and worked our way through the wilderness, at least the first time through, and we've made it. And the promised land is in sight.
Woohoo! Well, what we want to remind you is that even though the promised land is in sight, if you remember back to those stories, all hell broke loose when Israel saw that promised land.
Remember the spies? They sent the spies out. They get the promised land in sight. They send the spies out. 12 spies go out and have all sorts of interesting adventures. But when they come back, at least a group of them seem to exaggerate pretty seriously what was over there and the hardships, and it's not going to be as wonderful as you think it is, and so on and so forth. And there's a vote taken, and the transformational journey, at least that part of the journey for that time, was totally scuttled.
Yeah. Well, you'll also maybe remember that was only when the older generation, those who'd been there for the duration of this journey, passed away, that they were able to head into the promised land. And what our hopes are is that your older generation or your long timers will not have to pass away to be able to enjoy the promises that are waiting for you as you fulfill this vision that God has given you and that you've accepted. So we want to talk a little bit today about the issues, what you could do, how to finish well, really how to finish well, and then give you a little preview of what you need to do after that. So let's start with those issues.
All right. Well, we find that there's 3 key issues that typically take place when a church gets heading out on the transformational journey and gets to the promised land and they can see it. And the first one is when that promised land is in sight, then suddenly those who have been in power before, perhaps those who really haven't been all that whippy about this transformational journey in the first place, those who have just not been totally 100% on board, suddenly the inevitability and the permanence of these changes that have already been made and changes that will be made in the promised land, suddenly like they ka-ching, and they register in their heads, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, wait. And it's like they didn't think they were actually going to get that far, and they do anything.
Well, I have to say it's not only that they didn't think they could get that far. I think that they had no sense that they could get that far, or in some cases, I wonder if they were hoping that they didn't get that far. Like, well, go ahead and try it. And now here they are. It can get real ugly at this place. I have to tell you. You will see fights. You will listen to lies. There will be accusations made. They will impugn the character of the leadership, and particularly the pastor, other folks that are out front there. So just know that the closer you get to fulfilling that vision, the uglier it may get.
And this particular group, they're going to see this as their last stand. So it's a fight to the death in a very real sense. They're fighting for whatever used to be, and the good old days, the good old places, whatever. They're fighting for that, while of course the vision is trying to take them into a preferred future. But it's not their preferred future, and all of a sudden they will do everything they can to scuttle it. So that's the first issue that we often see. But hang on, there's 2 more. Second is that during the transformational journey, when you get to the last third, many churches, not all, but many, will have experienced significant growth as they've gone through this. There's a sense of hopefulness in the congregation as progress is made, particularly those who perhaps have been on the fringe, and some new people have come on board and picked up without hope. And typically, what we find is these churches who are going on this third leg is they're about at the double size. They started with 30 and now there's 60. They started with 100, now there's 200. They started with 500, now there's 1,000. But here's what happens is that the people who have been coming along and the people who are in power or who were in power on a subconscious level. I don't think anyone does this on a conscious level, but maybe. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
That on the subconscious level, they realize they're going to get outvoted, which means that they're going to lose their power.
So this can get so ugly, and unfortunately, one of the side effects can be that those folks that you've been growing this church with aren't just sheep that are shifting to your congregation. That these are new and baby Christians, and they come into the church, conflict breaks out, and what they're going to see is everything that they've heard about the church, or they've thought about the church, the hypocrisy, the fighting, the conflict. One of the congregations I pastored was one of those that doubled in size. And I remember being in a congregational meeting, and the crap was hitting fans everywhere. And one of our baby Christians was standing there, and he said, "Wow, this looks like politics to me." And I said, "Yeah, unfortunately it does, and it can be really, really bad. So know that dynamic may very well be going on in your congregation."
Well, and here's what often happens at this level. And again, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt to those who this is on a subconscious level, but whether it's conscious or unconscious, some sort of a conflict will break out. And it could be over something very petty, or it can be something over major. It very often has nothing to do with the transformation itself. It'll be someone takes exception to some line in the bylaws or the way some room was painted or something. It'll be really on minutia in many cases. But the effect is just exactly what you're saying, is that all those new people, they lose heart, they leave. And I can tell you time and time again, I've worked with churches where they had grown to that double and they find themselves back exactly where they were when they started. And with this piece is that they're worse off.
Yes.
Because the transformation can't happen again, at least until the old generation or the generation that has experienced this has moved on. And we're not talking about 100 years. We're talking, 5, 10, 15 years.
Or longer. And unfortunately, what we see are two other pieces. One is the congregation just doesn't go back to where it was. It goes even smaller than where it was. And the other is it takes up a lot of resources to make this transformational journey. It takes people resources. It takes energy. It takes financial resources.
It takes buy-in by the people.
Right. And a failure to reach the promised land really makes people clench down more on those resources, and they're less likely to use them in the future for something bright. And while some of that generation or all that generation may pass away, they will leave after them. Part of their legacy will be this culture of we can't do it. Their self-esteem goes into the toilet. They may find themselves in survival mode, even though they have lots of money that's there. I want to point out another dynamic that I've seen with the loss of power and control. Remember talking to a long timer in a congregation. He was a founding member of a 50-year-old congregation, and he said it was as though he was really pushing back. They were at this stage. He was really pushing back, and he said, I think I've been snoozing. And all these months, and he says, I've got to take my responsibility in this because I have not been active. I have not been part of what's going on. I just kind of showed up and rubber stamped things, but I really wasn't thinking about it. And I want to put a shout out for my book, Top 10 Ways to use your congregational time bomb. And in there's a whole chapter about it's kind of like being on a cruise ship, but actually you went to sleep on a cruise ship and all of a sudden you woke up and you find yourself on a working trawler. And so now you're fishing for folk. And but that's not the ship you thought that you were on. And so that unmet expectation, all of those things that can go on. Well, actually, that goes into our third piece.
Right, it does indeed.
Yeah.
So the third piece is that, as you go along and people start seeing this promised land in front of them, there will be those who signed on with the original vision, who really was behind it and were perhaps even close friends with people there in the congregation who were behind the transformation. But as it draws closer, suddenly they realize that this isn't the preferred future. This isn't the vision. This isn't the promised land that they thought it was going to be, that they had something totally different in their minds. And it's not that someone deluded them or tricked them. It's just that suddenly they realized that this isn't what they had thought about. And so they have typically these people will have one of three responses.
Well, yeah, they'll leave quietly, just kind of slip out a side door there.
They like slip through the cracks. They just sort of go.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking I know a congregation where that's happening right now. People are starting to wake up and say, where are they? They may leave not so quietly. I'll tell you, there's a little worse than the door swinging open and shut, open and shut, open and shut as a person goes out and comes back, goes out and comes back. They're not going to leave quietly, or they may leave, but they're not really leaving because they're burning up the telephone, or I guess they could be on the email or Twittering these days. So they'll not leave quietly. And the third
one is that instead of leaving, they'll try to either detour, they'll try and change the vision to match what they had thought in the beginning, or they'll try to derail the process completely. And again, they'll do it with conflict. They'll do it however it takes to try and undo where the congregation has decided they're going.
I want to give an example, again, another example, because I think some of these things, we keep talking about, we're going to write the textbook someday, that, or just all of these pieces that are very textbook. We see them happen in congregation after congregation, and one of those that I don't think we really think about as being a tactic is when people will start to say, oh, but what would Miss Mabel think? And so they say that to one person who says it to another person, and the next thing you know, they're making changes based on Miss Mabel and what she might think and how she would feel. But when you go and you talk to Miss Mabel, you find out that, wow, she really likes the words up on those screen because she can see them for the first time in 25 years. Or she likes that there are children in the church again, that she's not on this side. So just, if you start to hear excuses, you start to hear what ifs, if you start to see things banding about, be on your guard. It's very likely that you're watching manifestations of what that things are not what folks expected.
All right. So those are the three key issues of what happens when congregations get near and start peeking into the promised land. And I have to say that this is one of the real critical times because one of these three is going to happen. There is not an opportunity. It's going to happen. Okay. Bottom line is, folks, you might as well prepare for it because you're going to have people who try to scuttle it. You're going to have conflict come up, and you're going to have people leave. In fact, you're going to have all three whenever you get to that place in a transformational journey. When you get to that last third, it's critical time. And it's also the time that we see more transformational opportunities or attempts fail.
Yeah. Because
they can't take the heat. The congregation surrenders to the 2 or the 3 or the 4, and they back off.
What I really hope you'll do is that when these conflicts start to break out, they'll come at odd times. You'll get weird pushback. And things you never thought could happen are going to happen. Please, please, please take one moment and think, isn't that what Bill and Kris were talking about? Wow. Haven't I heard this somewhere? Wait. Maybe maybe it's okay. And in a way, this isn't bad or good. I mean, the behavior is probably bad, not at all acceptable, but the bottom line is this is just what is. And so you can't get freaked out by it. The best thing you can do is acknowledge this. A number of times I've said to pastors, well, this is what you get for being such a great leader. You know, you've kind of asked this because this is part of the process. So just because you're in this contentious part of this journey doesn't mean that it's all going to hell in a handbasket. It does, however, mean that you've got to keep doing your work and don't back down. So here's how to finish well.
All right, so we're going to talk about finishing well, and we want to talk about that. When you get to that place where you're on this last third, and you can start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, that it's time to stand up and to put these practices into place, some of which we hope you're already practicing as you're going, but to redouble your efforts so that you can finish well and cross into the so you can finish well and cross into the promised land. And so with that being said, the first thing you have to do is you've got to keep on vision casting. You've got to continue, even though you can see the promised land, you have to help people see what's going to happen when they actually get there. How are lives going to change? How is the church going to respond? What is going to be the net result of this journey? What you've endured. Continue to cast that vision, to paint that picture. Paint it brightly, paint it often. Continue.
Well, and with that, give them glimpses of where the vision is coming into play. You know, that as you're glimpsing the promised land, you're going to, so to speak, be seeing some of the fruit, right? Israel sent spies in, they were like, oh my gosh, and there was all this fruit that was there. So you need to be starting to show what the fruit is and lifting that up as well as you're doing this vision casting. No negativity, positive, realistic though, because otherwise people are going to say, oh, you're just what is that, a Pollyanna, and
pie in the sky, by and by stuff.
Yeah. Out you go.
Well, and I want you just talked about negativity.
Yeah, good.
I want to talk about negativity because there is a place for negativity, and that is when you revisit the past. One of the things that often happens when you get this far is that the good old days have become legend, and that people don't remember what it was like last year, 2 years, 3 years ago when you started this journey, when you made and set out on this bold adventure to grow your church to 500 or to become a voice in the downtown corridor or whatever it is. You need to help people remember pre-Exodus, the slavery of wherever you were and whatever it was, and what it would have been like, what the fate of the church might have been like if changes hadn't been made. What was the trajectory of the church back then?
When you do that, make sure you give very concrete examples. You want to be careful not to step on people's toes, but on the other hand, if you just do it in generalities, people will blow you off. So you've got to be very clear as you revisit that past.
You have to paint the past just as vividly as you paint the future. If you don't paint them both equally well, then, as I say, they'll blow you off on both sides. They have to remember why they set out. And if they don't remember, then they're going to go back because it's going to look a whole lot easier back there.
I'm kind of thinking about Noah's Ark. I was preaching on Noah's Ark this last weekend, and how you've got that flood, right? And it's dark and it's raining and all this stuff, and then you get some light, but they're still not sure, and so they got to keep sending out again. Now it's a dove, not a spy, or it's birds, right? And they're going out there, and okay, are they bringing anything back? What is it? Okay, maybe now, right? There's some ground. Maybe now we can venture out, but I still think it was when they've got the gray sky, and it's not until they see that bow in the sky that they've got that promise. They've got the what they need to say, yeah, we're going to move ahead now into our future instead of just sleeping on the boat for the rest of our lives, right?
All right.
Okay.
Well,
so
one of the next key things you're going to have to do as you move into the promised land, as you make this last third, is one of the things that almost always has to happen is there has to be a leadership shift. That some of the old guard, if you will, are going to have to surrender their jobs, their positions to those who can live well in this new promised land, because not everyone who lived well, even on the journey, is able to live well, function well, and continue, because guess what? The journey is not over when you cross the promised land, but who can continue that journey well when they reach the promised land. And that's going to be painful. In some cases, it may not be as painful as it could be, but it is going to be imperative that new leaders who have perhaps joined the journey during the journey, who have caught that vision, are taking places of responsibility.
Well, I have to say I disagree with you in one area, and that is that they need to have joined the journey sometime behind. You've got to have people who know the context, who've been walking there. They have to be building up their own favor amongst the congregation, and so I think one of the biggest failures I see in congregations is they start putting brand new people in, or folks who've just come in the last year, 2 years,
Yep.
3 years. Because they're desperate for new leadership, and nobody respects them, or very few people respect them, and they become a target for folks. So be careful about that. The other piece of that is, apprenticing. We need to apprentice leaders, and so to get our current leadership, part of this transformational journey, perhaps should be moving, setting up a culture of apprenticing. And so you've got your long timers, people who've been in leadership, you've got the new people working together. And then, these folks will move maybe into other kind of ministries, or they may move off and hear that. So you've got some continuity there. People who know, okay, again, though, if these long timers are displaying that inappropriate behavior, then you don't want them apprenticing the new people, and it is time to move them out. But where you're able to do that, move them along. And remember, those of us that are in these congregations where you've got turnover every 3 years, you come onto a class for 3 years, then you can change over almost all of your leadership within a 3-year period.
All right, and I don't totally agree with you, but we'll not go there. I think some leaders need to be the new folks, but I agree with you. You wouldn't put someone who joined the church last year as a board chair or something like that.
Right.
But you do want an infusion of new leaders, and I agree with you. The apprentice process is absolutely key. All right, there's the next piece. The fourth piece is in finishing well is that when you started this journey, we hope you developed you had a goal, you knew your vision, and that you created strategies and put together tactics, and that with those tactics came mile markers or mileposts, and then logistics came along, and that you have a well-defined plan. You know where you're going step by step, and yes, you're tweaking as you go. That's what tactics do. But that you're moving along and you have a plan. Hey, when you get to this part of the journey, stick with your plan. If it's brought you this far so far, then continue the plan. Work your plan. Because if you don't work your plan, well, you're planning to fail and all that kind of stuff, all those trite little things. But you'll find yourselves making course corrections that aren't correct.
As you're saying that, it makes me think of two things. One is that some of us have a self-destructive piece and a self-fulfilling prophecy stuff that goes underneath us, and it could be easy to detour from that plan because of that. And we said in an earlier episode, not sure if it was the first or the second now, that do not change your plan without going back to your strategists. People that are living this out have no business changing the plan. You've got to go back to the people who looked at the total piece, who have those giftings, and then you can talk with your tacticians, because if you've got questions about your tactic, it could be easy, and particularly because if you've grown like this, you may have a little bit of hubris going on there, a little bit too much be proud in a negative way, not prideful, but proud, or no, be proud. Anyways, it doesn't matter if you're being
Prideful,
negative about
not
it.
proud.
Right. And what's going to happen there is that you could say, oh, we should do this, and it's the latest and the greatest, and you're going to have people from other congregations wanting to know what you did, and out and about, you're going to be trying new stuff. Do not do it. It's not up to you, strategists, tacticians.
Work your plan. All right. The next piece is you have to keep the momentum going.
Yeah.
The momentum that you've got built up has got to continue, and that means you got to continue to celebrate those little victories and big victories. And everyone you can come upon, celebrate, celebrate, celebrate.
There you go. Well, and finally,
yeah, but what about the conflict that we promised?
Well, that's where I was going.
Right. I mean, we promised your conflict, point 1, point 2, point 3. All of them are going to happen at some level. What about that?
Well, the key to the conflict is the only way you can finish well is by starting well, right? Good endings depend on good beginnings. And the only way to do that is you've got to have your expected behaviors in place. Expected behaviors.
Congregational covenant of conduct.
Right. And leadership covenants tell you how you're going to treat one another and how you'll deal, what you'll do when you're not treating each other as you as you're expected. So get those expected behaviors in place. We say this over and over again, and we'll say it again right now. You can't even get to where you're visioning and doing that vision stuff to get on this transformational journey until you have your expected behaviors in place. So if you're watching this and you haven't done your expected behaviors, if you haven't worked through a process like the one that 21st Century Strategies has, or the one that I like to use with the Flip My Church workbook, then step back and get those expected behaviors done.
All right.
There
now,
it is.
There you are. That's that last third. But we're not done yet.
One more thing.
Because the question is, what's next?
Right.
What happens when you actually cross the Jordan? When you make it into the promised land, your vision has been reached. Well, folks, mission is unchangeable. Values should be inviolable.
Yeah.
But vision is dynamic. It changes. As you reach the promised land, a new vision must be cast. And remember, without vision, the congregation, the church perishes.
I want to say that it is dynamic. Vision is dynamic, but it also emerges. It is forever emerging, and one of the beautiful pieces is that as new people come in, they're not there by mistake. You may think it's because you brought them in, but God had a hand in this. And the visioning processes allow for you to look at who God now has gathered into this place, who your body of Christ is. It's a nice time to check and see how your community outside your doors may or may not have changed. And then to say, okay, what are we supposed to be doing? And so out of that is merging this new vision. So don't rest on your laurels.
Well, and that's the last piece I want to say is there's a real temptation by a lot of churches that, wow, we've got here, let's take a break. Don't do it.
No.
It is death to take a break. Airplanes fall out of the skies when they stop moving forward. You cannot take a break. And I just want to end this session by reminding you of Newton's immutable law of church. You didn't know Newton had one, did you? Yeah, he does. And the immutable law of church growth by Newton is that a church at rest tends to stay at rest.
It's true.
But a church in motion tends to stay in motion. Hey, we're out of time. We'll see you next week.
Have a great week.